Good afternoon. Thanks for joining. Too close. So you're in the durability session, and durability or permanence, I call it permanence. I'm probably going to use both terms frequently back and forth. It's one of those topics that is really talked about a lot right now. It's debated about and sometimes maybe argued about, but we want projects, carbon projects, to really deliver these long-term benefits and have confidence in the benefits, the climate benefits that they're providing. And when we're thinking about NBS, nature-based solutions, I think we're crediting things that are really dynamic and evolving. They're dynamic systems. And so we need to really think about, when we're thinking about these things, how do we guarantee, or how should we be thinking about durability? Sorry, I'll stop doing that. So today we're going to talk about, how we handle durability with nature-based solutions, and how we do that in practice. So we'll visit kind of challenges, innovations, maybe how the market's looking at it in terms of premiums and pricing. So I'm joined by a great panel today with really diverse perspectives. I'll get the hang of it by the end of the session, I promise. So I'm joined by Tracy Johns, who is a environmental program manager at Apple, and she's going to be bringing that buyer perspective.
That microphone needs to be a lot closer to you.
Okay. Hopefully no more feedback. You guys good? And then to her left is Jack Blackwell, who is VP of Lands at the Chugach, Alaska Corporation, who's going to be providing that project developer perspective. And then to my right, I have Sheldon Zakreski, who is head of carbon sales at Greenline Climate. And I am Kristen Gorguinpour, I'm VP of Technical at the Climate Action Reserve. So I have a standards kind of perspective. So to kick it off, I think maybe a great place to start would be just thinking about what we mean when we talk about durability and what is the definition of that. So I'm going to just open it up to the panel and say, so when we say durability or permanence, what does that actually mean in practice from your perspective, and how would you define it? And maybe you can start with Tracy.
Okay, my turn to try with the mic. Okay. Thanks for having me, Kristen. It's good to be here. Good to see you all. So when we think about durability, in its most kind of simple form, it's referring to how long carbon is stored in the reservoirs where we are trying to put it for climate mitigation, whether that is biogenic storage with forests and soils, or it's geologic storage where we use new technologies to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere and store it in onshore or offshore reservoirs. It can also refer to storage in materials like biochar or mass timber. And so it's referring to how long we expect or how long the carbon stays in that storage form. But I think where it gets complicated and confusing sometimes is that the word is also used to capture the idea of the risk that it doesn't stay stored, so that it gets reversed or lost. And so that one term ends up sort of representing both the length of time that we expect something or that something stays in its form of storage, and the risk that we think that it will be reversed. And so that can be complicated sometimes and causes confusion. But I think it's important to remember when we're talking about durability that it's not a binary, permanent or temporary framework. It's a spectrum. And there are a lot of things that we have control over that affect the durability and that affect the risk of reversal. in practice, it's one important factor that as a buyer we consider and need to consider when we're looking at investing in a project or in a carbon removal pathway. And that is along with a lot of other really important factors, including the additionality of the activity, including the positive or negative potential ecosystem and community benefits, including the readiness to deploy at scale and safely, including the cost. And so it is one important factor among all of those that we have to consider. And in a world where we didn't have any trade-offs, we'd pick the approach that ticks the boxes and performs in a stellar way across all of those categories. But we know as we are building portfolios as buyers and as we zoom out to the global level of climate targets, there are some unavoidable trade-offs. And so we have to keep those in mind when selecting and prioritizing based on all of those factors. I think for Apple, practically what that means is that over time, buyers should invest in a portfolio approach that invests in ready-to-deploy at scale nature-based solutions now, while also preparing and scaling the pathways for newer technologies that need to come online in order for us to stay on track with Paris targets.
Great, Jack.
Thank you. It's great to be up here and learn from the panelists as well and listen to their perspective here. So I'm excited to be here. Before I answer this question, I'd like to just kind of explain, the company that I work for, and it's important to understand the history here and how I ended up on this stage. But I work for an Chugach, Alaska corporation, which is a regional Native corporation. In 1971, Congress passed the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act that created 12 regional corporations and 200 village corporations. And they gave the corporations land and money and came up with this corporate structure. So the Alaska Natives were immediately thrust into this capital society, given land and money, and the challenge of trying to figure out how to make it work for their shareholders. And so the original shareholders were Alaska Natives that were 1/4 blood quantum at the time ANCSA passed in December of 1971. We have a corporate structure with corporations owning the land and not the tribes, and that's a very big distinction in our state and how Congress dealt with this in Alaska, which is different than the lower 48. We've got about 1 million acres and 3,000 shareholders. We have 3 components to our mission that include a profitability, a cultural component, and a lands component. And so we like to think that we're a corporation with a social component to it. And so some of our initial efforts with trying to generate land or generate revenue from the land included selling the timber. And we had a number of timber sales in south central Alaska, but we have transitioned to a company with nearly 5,000 employees throughout the world that provides government services contracts. We have commercial holding companies with businesses in the field of energy, oil spill response, and environmental. This area along the northern Gulf of Alaska, it consists of Sitka spruce and western hemlock forests. And in 2014, Chugach began looking at opportunities in the carbon field and was an advocate to participate with the California Cap and Trade program. Since 2020, we've sold over 6.5 million CCOs on 50,000 acres of corporate land. Now, our carbon program aligns with our self-determination and intergenerational prosperity and are vital to the shareholders of the corporation. We view our company as being a forever company that retains its land. Durability and performance fits right in with our 100-year strategy and has been a very positive program for us to participate in. Subsistence and traditional use of the lands are vital to the shareholders in our corporation. Improved forest management projects allows an opportunity for sustainable forest management and generating revenue without extracting resources.
Thanks, Jack. Sheldon, your thoughts?
Hey there. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and welcome to the never-ending story that is the debate about permanence. I'm Sheldon Zakreski with Greenline Climate. We are a improved forest management project developer, so we kind of sit at that intersection of, I think we're sort of the translators between both the landowners and the end buyers. We design the credits according to different standards, and we sort of facilitate sales. And so, I guess in my world, in my intersection, a lot of how I define permanence, durability, and how it's defined in the conversations I have is that it is essentially a policy call or a business decision around how long we're going to reduce or remove carbon before a reversal could occur without consequence. Just keep it short and sweet.
I like that. It's hard to do with durability, right? It's interesting. I'm hearing, there's from Tracy, there's this technical, standpoint. I think Sheldon, you're kind of speaking to that too, just very straightforward, but also that it's not binary. And Jack, you've kind of talked about kind of the characteristics or benefits or how you kind of tie that durability along with your overall strategy. So it is interesting that it's not just a scientific definition of durability, but we're kind of looking at different aspects or characteristics with that. But maybe just digging in a little bit more on durability, and curious, Tracy, from your perspective as a buyer, if is there a level of durability that you expect when you purchase a nature-based credit, or any thresholds or timeframes you're considering, or is it about maybe these other qualities that we've kind of been touching on a little bit?
For scalable solutions, including nature-based carbon removal, these solutions that are ready to scale now have the potential to reduce peak warming and delay dangerous climate tipping points, while the technologies that have lower reversal risk but are not as far along in terms of understanding their effectiveness and risks at scale have the ability to have the time to scale up. And so I think the more important buyer question is not so much how permanent an individual credit is, but how do you manage risk across different reversal risk profiles in a portfolio that's designed to diversify those risks and not focus in too much on any one, but looking at the long term for what we need for climate mitigation over time. In addition to all of the other risks and qualities that we look for as a buyer that I mentioned previously. Given the complex longevity spectrum of emissions in the atmosphere when we make the emissions that we need to offset, we need to seek for our credits that they are durable and that we include measures to address the risks of reversal and other risks and compensate for any reversals within a defined period of time. And so I think, again, as buyers, we should be focusing on how to manage risk across different reversal risk profiles of different projects and project types, not how permanent is this one credit or this one project. I think in terms of numbers, the ICBCM's 40-year minimum durability for CCP eligibility is becoming a key market threshold that creates a defensible minimum bar in the market. For projects that we purchase at Apple, we require 40 to 100-year minimum durability commitments, and we prioritize projects that are designed to be durable over the longer term. The time period of this 40 to 100 years is absolutely critical for getting us on the right path to full deployment of of the mitigation options that are available today to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change and buy us time, essentially, while we bring global emissions down and do that most important work of decarbonization and develop the technologies that will keep us on that trajectory towards our Paris Agreement goals. We believe that a well-designed project will drive longer durability through a combination of mechanisms, including designing for durability at the outset and incentivized to design for durability at the outset, including improved monitoring capabilities and better abilities to understand reversal risk and manage it, including contractual mechanisms that clarify the commitments around durability and clear guidance and roles for market actors when a reversal happens. So all of those things combined together, I think, can reduce the reversal risk and improve our ability to manage reversals across the board and allow us to focus on how do we get the maximum deployment of mitigation now, manage and compensate the atmosphere when reversals happen, but not using any one project feature as a way to disincentivize the mitigation at scale that we need.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear, it's not just a number of 40 years or 100 years, maybe that's like a benchmark. And really what you're looking at is, the risk aspect and how do we manage that risk of reversal and kind of doing it at an aggregate level, right, across a portfolio, which is interesting. Maybe drilling down to at the project level and managing those risks. Jack, would love to hear from you, just as you're developing projects, what on the ground considerations are important for you to ensure that long-term durability, managing those risks, and is there anything that you might be prioritizing for your projects?
Sure. To start with, we try to prioritize subsistence and traditional use through sustainable forest management and conservation. This entire region was affected by the Exxon Valdez oil spill in 1989 when 37 years ago 11 million gallons of oil spilled in this region. It affected the entire region and was right smack dab in the middle of our region, literally miles from one of the native villages. The nice thing about improved forest management projects is they support healthy ecosystems and the recovery of injured resources and services. They also provide important fish and wildlife habitat. Our region includes Prince William Sound and the Copper River drainage and delta, which are really important areas for migratory birds. And so the land and the resources, the fish and wildlife are very important to our shareholders. They prioritize that. And the carbon projects align with our values of intergenerational prosperity and again with our 100-year plan. The land is extremely important to the Alaska Natives in this region. Chugach views its company as a forever company, and what we do today is just a snapshot in perpetuity. So, looking at carbon projects, specifically the IFMs, that really provide great benefits to the Alaska Native people in my region.
Thanks, Jack. It's really interesting to, I think about managing risk. You might not necessarily be thinking about it directly, oh, I got to keep this carbon credit, going, but thinking about it just overall with the stewardship of the land and making sure that you're providing benefits, and along with that, it seems like you can manage that durability risk. Sheldon, we've heard some of a buyer perspective of kind of what they're thinking about with durability, but would love to hear from you about like how you communicate about durability to your buyers, and just what has been your experience with like what buyers want to know and like what they want to know to feel confident about the risk and confident that their credit is permanent and durable.
Yeah, I think the sort of discussions we have with buyers tends to fall along one or two lines depending on the type of transaction. So if we're talking about a secondary transaction where the project's already verified, validated credits, as what Tracy said, the permanence carries like a lot less weight. It's very much using the ICVCM 40-year period as a helpful benchmark. When you're talking about primary transactions, that's where we've got projects that are under development. We're working with a buyer who's doing a major long-term offtake. Those are very bespoke type of discussions, and a lot of times where the discussion around durability, permanence sort of falls along is how can we use that funding, which is meant to be catalytic and transformative in nature, to try to design a project to where we can like extend the permanence out as long as possible. And in past iterations, I've seen, again, it depends on the landowner objectives. We've been able to provide essentially a perpetual permanence, even though the standard lasts 40, 100 years. We've had projects where we could put conservation easements on. So there's other mechanisms that will have a discussion between the buyer and the landowner in these primary transactions of what we can do to sort of ensure that funding is changing the management practices and not leading to a sort of going back to business as usual and trying to live beyond when the standard body says it's okay to no longer manage it for permanence.
Great. Yeah, that's interesting. It's really like, maintaining kind of that activities to reduce the risk overall. So maybe jumping a little bit into kind of challenges that we might, face. There's lots of challenges, right? Dealing with durability. We've been talking about the risks, but also, maybe digging in a little bit more. When we're talking about durability, it's really long time frames, right? And I'm curious to hear from Jack, like from your perspective, is there anything for managing this risk that's like especially difficult to manage? Like I can imagine like the Valdez situation, that would be really hard to, think about or mitigate against. So just love to hear your thoughts on like how you're kind of thinking about this and what's hard to manage over time and over these long time frames, essentially.
So, a disaster like the Exxon Valdez oil spill, that's not, related to climate, or it wasn't probably a threat on anybody's radar screen before it happened. But some of the common threats to long-term durability include threats from disease and wildfire. We're very fortunate with this coastal rainforest in that we don't have a significant threat of wildland fire. And so disease has been pretty minimal and hasn't really affected the forest significantly along the coast. But we are starting to see risks from climate change, and that are many of which remain to be seen. But some of the impacts that we're starting to see are higher precipitation with both rain and snow at times. And so, the snow can affect the forests as well as the rain. But with rain, the one thing that we're seeing is these major weather events that saturate the soils, drop a significant amount of rainfall, and then the potential for landslides. And just in the last decade, we've seen a number of landslides in our coastal communities that have killed people, and so this is a higher risk than it was, say, 50 years ago. But you can connect it to our changing climate. Other, I would call it risks, not necessarily risks, but challenges that we have to address are the cost to inventory and verify. And that's a significant cost for us where we're at, cruising timber in these remote areas requires setting up camps. A lot of the access is by helicopter, some boat, hiking through challenging terrain, but also having to deal with weather and wildlife. And weather, even in the best of times in the summer, can cause delays, which if you have a helicopter sitting on the ground, that's thousands of dollars a day. That's just that you're on the hook for. I think that education is also really, I put it in here as a risk because I think it's, carbon is hard for people to understand. It is not a simple concept. People understand cutting down a tree, harvesting it, creating lumber, but carbon is fairly new. And with our IFM project, we had an extensive educational effort to help our board, our management, and our shareholders understand what carbon market is and whether or not we should participate in it. That educational effort can't stop when we are talking about durability and permanence. Those of us on the panel here are not going to be around forever, and it's important that our next generations that come up and take over for us understand and prioritize our commitment to these IFMs. A couple other issues, challenges that we had was the initial assessments were based off forest inventory analysis, which were off. They were on the low end, fortunately, so our models and our projections were a little lower than what we actually saw, which was a pleasant surprise. But I think buffer pools are one way to provide mitigation for ensuring durability, but that also affects the profitability of IFMP.
Great. Yeah, I know, as a standards program or standard, we kind of think about risk, and when we're talking about buffer pools, it's really these tangible risks that's wildfire, disease, things like that. But I think you bring up an interesting point too. Those risks are really they're kind of a moving target, right? We're trying to mitigate climate change, but also trying to manage how that's shifting over time. But I also thought it was interesting you brought in this kind of other risk maybe we're not thinking about, because it doesn't necessarily fit into that category of education and making sure these projects move forward, or just maybe education too with what is durability. And it's an interesting challenge to be thinking about. Tracy, from the buyer's side, are there what are the types of challenges you might be facing, and do you have challenges even evaluating durability for projects, or the things that you're kind of looking for?
Yes, I think that buyers face, in my mind, kind of one major challenge around durability right now that can be an inhibitor to investing in these projects. And that is, right now, it's quite difficult to compare across project types and removal pathways when you're trying to build a portfolio, because different standards are using different permanence frameworks, and it makes it hard for buyers to build a coherent, diversified portfolio, understanding how to manage reversal risks across different definitions and different frameworks. What counts as durable under one standard might not meet the threshold for another standard. And I think in addition to this, and certainly intensifying that, is the case that different jurisdictions are now also developing divergent policy frameworks around durability claims and eligible project types and expectations around durability commitments that make that fragmented approach even more challenging for buyers. Examples include the EU's CRCF, various California legislation, and Article 6.4. All of these set different requirements around durability. And these sort of fractured frameworks in which buyers and all of the market actors have to participate can weaken the incentives for buyers to engage, who will need to understand and predict how these definitions will impact our purchases and use of credits over time. So I think we need more consistent definitions and approaches for defining and addressing reversals across the registries and standards. And the markets can't scale if buying credits and making legitimate, high-integrity claims about them becomes a backward-looking, never-ending, expanding liability for the buyer because of reversal risk over time. We need more innovation around addressing reversals and high-integrity norms for the roles of all market actors when reversals occur over different time periods, so that it doesn't create a disincentive over time to continue using credits for what most buyers use them for. I think dropping down to the project level, while this is maybe something that affects projects, certainly more frontline, it affects buyers as well, and that is we need better ways to assess reversal risk at the project level also. The tools that are in use today can and should be updated, and in many cases they are being updated with the latest data, analytical capacity, and technological advancements. There are promising signs of this across the market now already, with standards getting more involved in applying data consistently to address project risks, with risk mapping advancing our ability to consistently assess project risk across project types, across regions, and with leading scientists and scientific organizations getting more involved with risk mapping and helping us understand and characterize risk. With this kind of information, along with the really exciting advances in remote sensing monitoring, I'm hopeful that some of the challenges that Jack mentioned around the difficulties of doing inventories and the expense of some of these sort of core project activities can be reduced for the project developer, so that communities can really take advantage of the new technologies and capacities to understand big data sets and use them to characterize and mitigate risk, can sort of democratize access to projects. And we have to be careful how that information and those new capacities are built so that it actually has that effect and not the opposite effect of making it even harder to access the carbon markets. But I think that capacity is there, and it's sort of ripe for the ability to reduce risks both for buyers and for other market actors.
Thanks. Yeah, not tease us up for our next section, but maybe before we get to that, want to bring Sheldon in to first maybe even tee us up even a little bit more. Like what do you view as gaps in managing permanence right now? Or, do you think buffer pools are enough? Insurance mechanisms, there's, all kinds of different mechanisms to be explored to kind of manage risk. Are these things sufficient?
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. I'm a fan of all of the above. In terms of gaps, buffer pools. They started out because there really was no alternative. It was a very, small market, and we needed a way to provide some assurances. And I think some of the gaps with buffer pools where the market has matured to is, standards body maybe doing regular stress testing around and providing that transparency to the marketplace to sort of say, hey, we conduct once every 3-year review, for example, and this is what's causing reversals. These are the things that we're seeing might be in a forward-looking basis that we have to think about, so that folks have just some faith in what's in the buffer pool. One of the things I think that was helpful in California, I know Carbon Plan came out with an assessment, and I know they focused a lot on fire risk, but being able to have this stuff out in the marketplace and this information, I think, is helpful. It leads to better policies, better practices, better confidence. And I think another piece is I'm always a fan of diversification. That's how insurance is structured, and so I don't think giving project developers and landowners the flexibility to say buy a methane destruction credit and put that into the buffer pool is, I know there are buyers who don't want that, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. But I'd say from a broader market policy perspective, having a buffer pool that is made up of permanent reductions as part of it is not a bad thing.
Great. Yeah, so I'm hearing there's lots of mechanisms out there that are probably useful, but maybe like a missing layer is like maybe the processes kind of related to that. Like, we have a buffer pool, but we might need to really like stress test that and make sure it is like fully capitalized, it makes sense. And just also I'm hearing having options. We talk about it in our program as optionality. I think that's a word. I'm not sure. But that's important too, to really give people different options. Maybe shifting, since we're on the upswing here of positive things, just getting into innovations. And Sheldon, maybe you can tell us a little bit more. Are there any innovations that are actually improving confidence in the market? Maybe things that are just newer?
Sure. Yeah, I think like a big innovation that's providing a lot of confidence in the buyer-seller relationship is a lot of the remote sensing technologies. Like at Greenline, it has a dual benefit for us. We're a project developer. We manage forests and all across the country, and we can't be everywhere at once. And so having these remote sensing technologies, it's great for us because we're able to get some data like what's happening on the ground, and we open to share that with buyers. But I always want to put the caveat out there that these are new technologies, and they are really great at detecting and finding out the what, but not the why. If I had $1 like every false alarm, because these technologies can't tell the difference between prescribed burning and fire is a management tool for forest health, but with a lot of the technologies out there, we're still getting like these alarm bells, and we're just sort of saying, hey, no, it's not an issue. This was planned, and this is just a way we manage the forest, and there's no reversal.
Great. So lots of tools like informing what's happening, but maybe less, with like actually managing it. Jack, from your perspective, are there tools that you're using? I know you talked about challenges with like inventory, but are there tools you're seeing in the market that could actually like meaningfully like help with this like project risk?
Yeah, I think remote sensing, I think that will be really exciting to see where that is in the future, with the advances in technology. But that also, creates a challenge for us as managers, and how do we manipulate that data, and it's fairly technical, and making sure that our team's proficient in that. We have the experts available to interpret that. So,
yeah, you can be well informed, but you have to do something with that data. It seems like we can get the data, but using it and figuring out the best way to maybe even layer on top of that, like, are there more innovations to help with that management? Tracy, you've started to kind of speak on this. Like, what would increase like your confidence as a buyer, and like, what are you excited about in the market that you're kind of seeing?
Yeah, all of us brought up remote sensing, and I think that is one really exciting area that should really help us to identify reversals, to characterize reversal risk, and to plan in a way that unlocks more mitigation. Jack alluded to this, but I would say there's not much out there right now, however, with how quickly these technologies are advancing and how diverse they are in terms of what they can do and what they can't do. There's not a lot of guidance out there for buyers, project developers, communities, in how to use the new technologies and how to know when they're being used appropriately or inappropriately. or in understanding what level of accuracy we can and should expect from them and what should require for the different ways they can be used within a project, and how to translate those into concepts like reversal risk and what it will cost to bring that risk down. There's an organization, a collaborative organization called ShiftCM that maybe some of you are participants in already or have heard of. It's a collaborative organization, a group of scientists and technical experts coordinated by Yale University and the Nature Conservancy. And they are working to develop exactly this kind of guidance. And it's really needed right now with the explosion of technologies. And you think about the different ways that remote sensing could be used in a project context, setting a baseline, doing monitoring, assessing risk. All of those could require different ways of using these approaches or different tools. And if you're not, a PhD in remote sensing, you might have trouble keeping up with those approaches and the right way to use them. So I think this kind of engagement with the market in making these technologies more accessible and providing some guardrails around how to use them should be a really great addition to that innovation. On the more sort of contractual side, let's say the Beyond Alliance, in collaboration with RMI and American Forest Foundation and Gorguinpour, are currently developing a white paper looking at maybe innovation in another way, thinking about contractual innovations such as contracted durability instruments that are, these are tools that are help to sort of crystallize the obligation to maintain storage over a specific time period with really clear contractual terms to sort of take away the gray areas around responsibility for durability and what to do in the case of a reversal. This is a distinct innovation from things like buffer pools, and I really liked Sheldon's recommendation around testing the health of the buffer pool and understanding how and when those buffer pools are being tapped into as an innovation as well. But those are remedy mechanisms for when a reversal happens. These contracted durability terms are a way to manage that risk in the contract. So an innovation on the contractual side as well. So all of these together, I think, combine a bunch of new approaches that allow us to think about reversal risk more clearly, to characterize it and manage it, and instead of seeing it as a means or as a reason to delay action or to hesitate around investment, really help us to invest smartly and aggressively now. And lastly, I would just note that the ICVCM's Continuous Improvement Working Group on Permanence has a list of priorities that they came up with that I think are really spot on, and I'm really hopeful that the market and experts working in this field can continue to build on those ideas and develop more innovations. There's just so much to be done in the fields of insurance and other mechanisms that the market can test and deploy that will really help us to bring down reversal risk and understand it and manage it when reversals happen.
Yeah, it's great to hear there's, excitement around innovations. They're happening. They can be potentially used, but I think, there's this layer also of, we need to align that innovation or technology with the standard or the methodology and, how do people implement that? How can it be verified? And that's a really important piece and kind of something, Sheldon, you were talking about earlier, more of the process-related aspects of these things. So, we can talk about, we want this durability length, there's some challenges, there's innovations happening that we can implement, but at the end of the day, ultimately, it's about how the market is going to kind of respond to all of these things. And so maybe jumping into just market expectations, maybe pricing of this durability. Sheldon, do you think, durability is actually priced into credits today, and or is it really just more focused on this spectrum of qualities that a credit should have?
Yeah, I think probably I'd delineate again between the secondary transactions where, permanence is one of the factors, but people place different values along, permanence, additionality, co-benefits, the sort of standard set of factors. When you get into the primary transactions, it can be a driver. I've definitely worked on some some transactions, particularly around grasslands, where the value of the land and putting in an easement on a grassland project and the role that had in permanence obviously was a driver of the price.
Great. And Tracy, from your perspective, is there a willingness from buyers to pay for increased or longer length of durability? Love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, I think that the second way that you characterize it, Kristen, is maybe the better framing. I think you are starting to see a willingness from buyers to pay for integrity and quality. And this sort of way of thinking about projects includes various credit quality aspects. It includes transparency, accountability, and durability and robust risk reversal mechanisms that meet or exceed the minimum bar set by the standards and policymakers. Companies as buyers, we want confidence that our investment will deliver lasting climate outcomes, and we're already seeing evidence of that as more companies align their portfolios with ICBCM CCP labeled credits to sort of set that minimum bar for expectations around durability. I think in general the market will be more vibrant and be able to come up with more efficient ways to achieve this and a diversity of approaches as we've noted. And so rather than prescribing a single durability premium that buyers pay or don't pay, I think it's maybe more appropriate and more sort of directional towards growth of the market to think about ensuring that the tools that the standards and contractual mechanisms and others use will allow buyers to manage risk and reversal risk in portfolios in ways that are credible and clear and verifiable and aligned with the evolving policy requirements. I think reversal risk is one factor that definitely does drive price, and these really kind of keystone projects that Sheldon has recommended, I just get so excited when I think about those, the ones that are able to bring in these long-term easements and just create a level of permanence that is really hard or impossible to do with just the standards and the methodologies. It's these really amazing moments when you're able to bring all parts of the carbon market together in really exciting ways. Those are the high bar, but the minimum bar is also really important. So I think that it is one factor that drives price, but it's all of these risks that we have to manage that I described earlier. And again, I think you're seeing more of a buyer willingness to pay for the integrity and more broadly managing the risks across projects than just a sort of permanence premium that focuses in on that one aspect of projects.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, it is interesting, we're in this session about durability, and it's this one topic, but it really is a lot more than that, and it is hard to just kind of pull out that one piece and again talk about it in a just binary way, as you've said at the beginning of the conversation. And Jack, from your perspective, as a project developer, maybe you might have a similar perspective, but as you're thinking about your projects, do you need financial incentives just to be focused on permanence, or is it really broader? You're thinking about your whole project.
I think that incentives certainly help, and the management costs for future verifications and inventory are extremely high, and as we're considering new projects, we need to factor that into how we pay for those and what sort of way that we will structure our cash to be able to factor those in the future. And so when we are looking at new projects, we also are looking at access and how do we access for future inventories, verifications. We have certain forested lands that are inaccessible, that the cost to access are too high, so we have not included them in a project. But it's the challenge that we have for the geography that we work in.
Great. Thanks, Jack. Yeah, it is interesting. It's you might need more incentives to tap, more projects, more maybe things that are, have longer term durability. I think we have time for one more question. I do like to end the panels like on a positive note, or just kind of like thinking about the what ifs, the future. So I'm going to open this up to the entire panel. I guess like thinking about like the future, next maybe 5 to 10 years. Do you anticipate a fundamental change in like how durability is viewed, or are there clear targets that like we should be like working towards? Maybe I'll just go down the line. We'll start with Sheldon.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like broader acceptance of insurance in the marketplace. There's like some exciting work doing around this like sort of permanence trust concept, and how we could like maybe start with a small pool of money today and grow that over the life of the project to be able to sort of help provide that longer term post-crediting period, post-project permanence, not necessarily at the landscape level, but along other levels, right, just to maintain that assurance. So those are like a couple of things that I see that are really positive developments that, if they can sort of, scale in the marketplace, I think will help maybe sort of alleviate this kind of an ongoing debate about, how do we sort of get a lot more, sort of confidence in nature-based, because, really I want to stress, right, that nature-based are the large-scale, technologically proven removals of today, and we need to support them, and I think there's a role for that, and also as a bridge to help provide that price signal for some of those larger-scale, permanent engineered removals, to be able to kind of come into place.
Thanks.
I think shorter duration would be helpful from a land manager's perspective. And then we've also, talked about technology improvements, remote sensing. I think those are two areas that would help, would be helpful on our end.
Yeah, I think we're all, next 5 to 10 years looking out, we're already seeing a shift in how durability is viewed and managed, and in a positive note, I would say. I think before our session started, maybe it was Sheldon made the point about the durable debate over durability, because it is a very long-running debate. But I am really encouraged to see some things that I haven't seen in this debate before, or this process before, which is collaborative policy development among organizations that come from across the range of carbon removal, for example, engineered removal experts and nature-based removal experts working together on policy proposals to drive investment across the board in climate mitigation. I think the technologies that we've mentioned are also opening up new opportunities to predict and track reversal risk and manage it more effectively, kind of take the black box notion out of it. It's reversal risks are real, but they're not a black box, and the risks and the challenges that they present are not insurmountable. And I think we're finally seeing, both on the technology side and on the sort of collaborative policy and proposal development side, some real innovation and efforts that will open up the way that we think about and transform the way that we think about durability over time. And I think, again, our target should be enabling the market to scale high-integrity carbon projects with the greatest impact on climate and on local communities and ecosystems as quickly and safely as possible, rather than being constrained by any definition that would reduce incentives to invest in mitigation rather than grow it. And we're starting to see that. I think we've learned from some of our maybe harder mistakes around this, and I see a lot of innovation and collaboration where I haven't seen it before, so I'm really encouraged by that.
Thanks. I think one of the big takeaways I think from this conversation is in what stands out to me is that we can't just look at durability as just one piece. It's really this intersection of science, risk management, market design, and innovation, and these things are constantly evolving, and it sounds like we're going to continue to be talking about durability, but it's really this broader conversation. So we're going to keep talking about it. maybe arguing about it, I don't know, debating about it. But thank you to the panel for their great insights, and thank you all for joining us. It's been a long day, I think, already. It's only day one of the conference. But we appreciate your time, and please help me thank our panelists.